Are you the kind of person who gets bored easily? Do you have a curiosity that can't be satisfied by just one topic? Well, have we got the podcast for you. Welcome to The Binge, the podcast where I'll be taking you on a whirlwind tour through the vast realms of everything. I'll be your host, and I'm serving up a smorgasbord of subjects to satisfy your intellectual appetite. On this show, we follow our curiosities wherever they may lead. 1 minute, we might be discussing the mating habits of sea slugs, and the next, we're delving into the history of competitive bass mouthing. No topic is too weird, too niche, or too outrageous. I'll be like a hummingbird flitting from flower to flower, drinking the sweet nectar of knowledge from every conceivable subject matter. And you're all invited along for the ride. On today's episode, we're going to start by learning about a pop diva. Then we'll take a hard left into the 1980s. And if we have time, we might even cover the state of modern farming. Farming, people. So stick around because with The Binge, you never know where we'll end up. Could be ancient Mesopotamia. Could be the artisanal cheese caves of rural Vermont. It's a delightfully manic mystery. I'm strapping on my curiosity helmet and preparing for liftoff. Join me, won't you? The intellectual adventure awaits. This episode brought to you by Tuna Fork. Billie Eilish. Let's be real. If you were a moody teenager in the late 2010s, Billie Eilish was either your spirit animal or the target of your irrational ire. At just 18 years old, this emo waif from Los Angeles had the entire mainstream shook with her haunting whisper vocals and penchant for wearing biohazard-level baggy clothes. Was she a brooding modern-day Stevie Nicks? A tiny alien beamed to Earth to warp young minds with her melancholic musings? Or just a random tall kid with Muppet-like features and a penchant for green hair dye? The world had no choice but to stop and stare at this fascinating, off-kilter creature. Of course, the origin story of Billie's ascent to goth pop domination is as quirky as you'd expect. While most preteens were dreaming of being the next Britney, little Billie Eilish was too busy being homeschooled by her starry-eyed parents and writing songs about corpse brides or whatever. No wonder she grew up to be the living embodiment of sadness from inside out. But don't let the melancholy shtick fool you. Eilish is also one precocious, foul-mouthed little firecracker. With her penchant for dropping C-bombs and F-grenades, she makes a Tarantino flick sound like Sesame Street. Her edgelord spirit is matched only by her savage sense of humor and total lack of chill. Yet, for all of her Grinch-like airs, Billie's also got a heart of gold. She's been an outspoken advocate for everything from vegetarianism to body positivity to destigmatizing Tourette's. So while her music might sound like the howls of the eternally damned, her message is all about radical self-acceptance and letting your freak flag fly. Of course, the real reason all you cranky Zoomers worship at the altar of Eilish is because she managed to bag an emo dreamboat boyfriend before the rest of us even hit puberty. At 16, she was already shacking up with that tall glass of brooding, Brandon Q. Adams. While we were all still trying to figure out how bras worked, Billie was out here living the angsty teen dream. So pour some Nightcrawler venom out for the OG goth GF. Whether you see her as an icon of vulnerability or just a strange little weirdo, one thing is clear. Billie Eilish is the melancholy spirit animal for an entire generation of youths. Suck on that, Avril Lavigne. The sad girl torch has been passed to a new era. The 1980s. If you were fortunate enough to be conscious during the 1980s, you'll undoubtedly look back on that decade with a heady mix of nostalgia and relieved bewilderment that we all escaped with our faculties intact. It was a time so overburdened with excess, indulgence, and unabashed trendiness that it's difficult to know whether to regard the era with wistful fondness or cringing secondhand embarrassment. Perhaps no greater emblem captured the gloriously over-the-top spirit of the 80s than its dedication to making everything bigger, brighter, and more excessive than good taste could possibly allow. From the frozen mounds of hairspray-assisted bouffants to the feather excesses of Miami Vice chic, it was an aesthetic arms race of unrestrained maximalism. And nowhere did this zeal for immoderation manifest itself more deliriously than in popular entertainment. Films like Top Gun and Ghostbusters captured the zeitgeist with a surplus of slow-mo high fives, bomber jacket fashion statements, and nuclear-grade quotability. On TV, a new breed of ultra-materialistic soap operas like Dynasty and Dallas became cult obsessions with their big hair, shoulder pads, and Machiavellian family squabbles. Even the music of the 80s seemed to be locked in a sonic arms race of grandiosity. From the grated reverb drums of Phil Collins to the shamelessly indulgent guitar solos of every third Bon Jovi song, it was an era when oral bombast reigned supreme. And who could forget the sartorial atrocities that passed for cutting-edge music videos on the fledgling MTV? Between Duran Duran's Frankenshoulder Couture and Cyndi Lauper's thrift store kaleidoscope ensembles, it was a carnival of the delightfully gaudy. Of course, the 80s were also a heyday for unabashed commercialism and nakedly materialistic pursuits. Greed, as Gordon Gekko so memorably proclaimed, was good. Legions of young urban professionals embraced the dress-for-success ethos, unironically donning suspenders and garish power ties like they were conducting a hostile takeover of the local Starbucks. Brick-sized mobile phones became de rigueur status symbols for the aspirational set, even if using them required lugging a suitcase-sized battery pack. It was a decade when even childhood became commodified and commercialized within an inch of its life. From the Cabbage Patch Kids pandemonium to the inexplicable ubiquity of Teddy Ruxpin dolls, it seemed every young person was swept up in the frenzy of must-have toy manias. Not to mention the insidious ways marketing found to infiltrate nearly every aspect of youth culture, from G.I. Joe cartoons to product-shilling rap songs about Burger King. Yet, for all its grotesque excesses and unrestrained bad taste, there was an audacious vibrancy to the 80s that made it irresistibly watchable, even at its most cringeworthy. It was a decade that didn't so much embrace camp as swaddle itself in it like a cozy neon-hued blanket. From the Wham fashion atrocities to the cult of Cyndi Lauper, it was an era when self-awareness and subtlety took a permanent holiday. So, while we may look back and wonder how we survived the 1980s with our dignity intact, there's also a begrudging respect for its defiant, glorious shamelessness. It was a decade with no off switch, no internal governor to rein in its wild impulses. For better or worse, the 80s went for broke in its pursuit for more, bigger, bolder everything. And that's perhaps its greatest legacy. The sheer audacity of its full-throttle ridiculousness. The state of modern farming, an exercise in insanity and sleep deprivation. As anyone even remotely adjacent to the agriculture industry can attest, the current state of farming is, to put it delicately, an absolute shit show. A veritable three-ring circus of chaos, despair, and praying that this year's harvest doesn't spontaneously combust for no adequately explained reason. Speaking of combustion, does anyone else suffer from reoccurring night terrors about waking up to their entire crop yield transformed into an unholy inferno? Or is that just an irrational fear that plagues the subconscious because Interstellar was watched one too many times? Either way, some may or may not have installed an emergency fire bunker in their root cellar. Just to be prepared for the inevitable corn apocalypse. But digression is easy. The point is, the life of a modern farmer is essentially one long exercise in masochism and self-flagellation. Between the uncooperative weather, the unrelenting pests, and the ever-looming specter of financial ruin, it's a wonder any sane person willingly opts for this professionally punishing lifestyle. Take the simple act of planting a field, for instance. What was once a relatively straightforward process of churning some earth and tossing in some seeds has now devolved into a logistical Rube Goldberg machine of environmental compliance, soil sampling, fertilizer calibration, and desperate prayers to whatever pagan crop deities may still be lingering. An offering ritual to the great maize goddess Xilochitla is currently being drafted in hopes of currying favor for this year's corn harvest. We're talking ceremonial rattles made from dried corn husks, a sacrificial burning of heirloom seeds, the whole 9 yards. If it means avoiding another yield straight out of Children of the Corn, whatever tribute the old ones demand shall be paid. Of course, once those seeds have, hopefully, taken root and sprouted into semi-viable vegetation, that's when the real fun begins, because now every waking moment becomes a battle of attrition against the myriad of pests, pathogens, and other blights that want nothing more than to reduce the future cash crop into an apocalyptic hellscape of twisted, unnatural abominations. PTSD-style flashbacks from the Great Potato Blight of 16 are still occurring. Thousands of acres, reduced to nothing but shriveled, oozing husks in a matter of days. The stuff of nightmares, tell you what. Never again will a russet be able to be looked at without breaking into a cold sweat and whimpering softly. Therapy has been unhelpful. But let's say, through either divine intervention or sheer dumb luck, the crop has made it to the harvest stage without any catastrophic, sanity-shredding disasters. Time to start counting those cash money stacks and planning that dream vacation, right? Oh, sweet summer children. Does anyone else have an irrational fear that the second that bumper yield finally arrives, some unforeseen biblical catastrophe will immediately descend? Because preemptive investments have already been made in industrial-grade weather machines, high-powered harpoon batteries, and a modest stockpile of anti-locust ordnance just to be prepared. One can never be too careful when tempting the whimsical wrath of the farming gods. No, the sad reality is that even after enduring the Herculean labor of actually producing a viable crop yield, farmers still have to run the gauntlet of market volatility, supply chain disruptions, and good old-fashioned corporate price gouging. It's enough to make someone want to take up a less soul-crushing profession, like leaping from a burning biplane into the gaping maw of an angry hippopotamus, or something similarly relaxing. Only sort of kidding about that last part. More than a few sleepless nights have definitely been spent lying awake pondering the merits of career hippopotamus metaphor in comparison to the current role as a modern farmer. The agonizing mauling almost seems preferable to the annual stress of getting yields to market without getting utterly fleeced by the processor, distributor, alien lizard people price-fixing overlords. And yet, despite all the back-breaking labor, the omnipresent threats of financial ruin and biblical pestilence, and the persistent fear that this might finally be the year crops get deemed obsolete by Brondo or some other dystopian agri-corporation, farmers persevere. Waking up before the literal crack of dawn, strapping on mud-caked boots, and heading back out into the fields to tempt fate and appease the fickle whims of god Demeter, Thulu once more. Is it sheer insanity? Undoubtedly. A labor of love and existential dread? You betcha. But at the end of the day, what other choice do farmers have? The world needs them like a rave needs glow sticks and underage binge drinking. They are the last Sisyphean line of defense against a total descent into soylent-fueled, corporate-sponsored starvation. So buckle up, grab that pitchfork, and pray this year's yield doesn't sprout tentacles and start speaking in indecipherable tongues. The state of modern farming is grim, but keeping on is the only option regardless. Looming insanity and potential human sacrifice demands it.